Me every weekend. Okay, good evening and welcome tonight. Just kidding. We have a wonderful event for you tonight and hopefully you'll learn something. You are, for the most part of, boy, a fabulous, fabulous school district. Look around you. This is unbelievable. And this is just one of 3 schools that you have like this. Be proud of where you come from. Olentangy Local Schools has long recognized the value of fostering strong partnership between the staff, the parents, and members of the larger school community, and this is a very large school community. One example that is nearly 10 years old is the Olentangy Parent Programs Team. The team was originally developed as an extension of the prevention services in the district, and while it has continued to morph over the last decade, the spirit of the mission has remained consistent, and that spirit and the mission is to empower parents with information and skills critical to raising children in today's world. Honestly, how many of you are parents right here tonight? Let me see your hands. That's what I thought. It is not an easy world to raise children in, is it? Oh, if I would have known it was going to be this difficult 10 years ago when I became a mom, I don't know if I would have done it. It's a challenge. But you know what, moms and dads? We are all in this together, and we have to stick together. There is one other key component that has stayed the same over the last decade. It's not a concept or philosophy, but a very special individual. And I bet 9 out of 10 of you people all know who I'm talking about. Her name is Carrie Kalin. And after speaking with her for a short time, I can tell you one thing. Her laugh is infectious. Yeah, I'm seeing a bunch of... And her heart is definitely in the right place. Carrie was the very first parent representative on the parent programs team, and she's been the anchor of the organization ever since then. Her unwavering passion and commitment, combined with her strong work ethic and dedication to perform, make her irreplaceable. However, I hate to tell you this, but after a decade of service, Carrie, she's going to have to move on. Her youngest child will be graduating from Olentangy High School at the end of this school year. I still can't believe you're old enough to have a 22-year-old also. One of the roles that Carrie has enjoyed most is hosting the community events such as the one that we're hosting tonight. So please everyone give a gracious warm welcome to Miss Carrie Kalin. Please Carrie, come on up.
Thanks, Mindy. Really? Do we have to do this? Thanks. That would be my husband. I had no idea this was happening. I really didn't. So bear with me. Yes, this is my baby committee, but I won't dwell on that. And Mindy gave half of my spiel, so we can get right down to business. And we kept your attention out there with all of those tables of good information. Our parent programs team has been around for 10 years. I am truly going to miss it. This is my farewell tour, and it's hitting me with this committee that I'm moving on. But we do offer 3 forums in the evening every school year. We have featured national renowned speakers as well as local. Our members are a collaborative group of district administrators, guidance counselors, school psychologists, community liaisons, nurses, staff, and district parents. We are always looking for more people to join our committee. We're completely funded by the elementary and middle school PTOs, and the high schools just started donating some money, so yay to them. And tonight, we're very excited to welcome Sheriff Walter L. Davis III. Since taking office in 2007, Sheriff Davis has been committed to partnering with parents to educate youth about the dangers of drug and alcohol abuse. His office is involved with the annual Parents Who Host Lose the Most. Definitely an issue with proms and graduations. And also the recently created Opiate Task Force. He oversees the county-wide LEAP, L-E-A-P, Drug Task Force, which seized record amounts of heroin and prescription drugs just last year. He and his office are actively working to stop illegal use, sale, and distribution of drugs in our community. Thank you, Sheriff Davis, for cleaning up our county. Also tonight, we have Steve Hedge. He is the Executive Director of the Delaware Morrow Mental Health and Recovery Services Board. He serves as co-chair of the Delaware County Opiate Task Force, along with Delaware Municipal County Judge David Sunderman. The purpose of the Opiate Task Force is to raise public awareness, educate the community, and eliminate opiate abuse and its consequences from every segment of our community. Steve is available to speak with you tonight if you're interested in resource materials or getting involved in the task force. And I myself can share a story. I had a sciatic issue last year. I'm recovering, still not better. But I was on Percocet, and my doctor let me go up, and within 18 hours, I was in the bathroom feeling like I was going to die. Had to call the squad and be rushed down to Riverside. And that was just from what I was allowed to be taking. So it's really dangerous, mixed with alcohol. So to start our event, we're going to welcome Doug Wentz. He is currently the Community Service Director for the Neil Kennedy Recovery Clinic in Youngstown, Ohio. In addition, he's the Director of Prevention Partners Plus, a joint venture between Neil Kennedy and Meridian Services. We also have a local branch of Neil Kennedy in Dublin, so don't forget that if needed. He's had over 30 years of experience in the field of chemical dependency prevention. He has provided extensive training and consultation to schools and communities in northeastern Ohio, western Pennsylvania, and nationwide. He is the past president of the Ohio Credential Board for Chemical Dependency Professionals and was the chairman of the board committee, which developed the prevention credentials for the state of Ohio. I really need a bottle of water after this. He's been actively involved with the Ohio Teen Institute for the Prevention of Alcohol and Other Drug Abuse since 1979, and I'm sure that has changed drastically. He has served as consultant for other youth-led prevention programs in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, as well as Ohio. He was the 2007 recipient of the Prevention Visionary Award from the Alcohol and Drug Abuse Prevention Association of Ohio. And on a personal note, he received his Master of Arts in Sociology from Kent State. Go Flashes, my daughter's a Flash. His wife is Kathy, and they have 2 children and 4 grandchildren, and he told me his granddaughter is as old as my daughter. So help me welcome Doug Wentz, and please silence your cell phones.
Good evening. I'm so glad there's not a podium here. I usually disappear behind those things. Pleasure to be out here with you all today. Again, I couldn't see. How many parents in the room? Are there any grandparents? Yay, let's hear it for grandparents. Okay. I'm going to share with you some old school wisdom, just some things I've learned through the School of Hard Knocks about things that we sometimes do out of care and concern that really don't help. And I'm titling, I guess, this slide, Avoiding Common Enabling Behaviors and Attitudes. These are some things maybe you'll recognize in yourself. If you do, don't beat yourself up about it. Just take a look at it. I know these things are still around everywhere because I send graduate students out from my class every semester to observe these things in communities and come back and report, and sure enough, these things happen. It is kind of a frightening time for all of us with the prescription drug abuse epidemic. Last year in the state of Ohio, there were 67 opiate prescriptions issued, 67 opiate prescription doses issued for every man, woman, and child in the state. How many of you took 67? Not too many of us. Okay, a lot of them are getting diverted. If today's a typical day in Ohio, 4 people will die from prescription drug overdose deaths. 4 people. Beginning in 2007, for the first time in history, accidental prescription drug overdoses eclipsed alcohol-related and traffic crashes as a leading cause of accidental death in the state of Ohio. 4 people every day, 4 Ohioans will die. The customer profile, at least at the Neil Kennedy Recovery Clinic, and I've been the epidemiologist for our State Department of Alcohol and Drug Addiction Services for the last 11 years. We're talking 18 to 25, college-educated, suburban, very bright, very connected people. Not your typical drug-seeking, my stereotype from the 70s. It's a different world today. And the story that you just heard about somebody getting hurt, and getting addicted to prescription opiates, all too common, unfortunately. And the leap to heroin, from prescription pills is not a very big leap at all. So we know a lot today about what works in prevention, and I'm going to share some of those ideas with you before I finish talking. We know some things that work. There's some things that we can all do, and I'm going to give you 3 simple ideas to leave with. But there's still, again, some enabling behaviors and attitudes that get in our way. And to quote Bob Newhart, stop it, stop it, stop it. There's just some things we need to take a look at. And here we go. Let me see. Okay. The first common enabling attitude and behavior is blaming. And the way this typically works, and I'm sure somewhere in the genesis of your parent group here at Olentangy, how many of you are members of the organization, of your parent organization? How many of you have been around for more than 5 years with this? You've probably heard some of these things. Parents historically, typically tend to blame schools. I've heard things in my career like, well, that pharmacy they call a school. Those teachers, they just don't even care. The administration has their head in the sand, why they're doing things in the bathroom and in the parking lot. And, so parents typically, sometimes if they get angry enough and frustrated enough, and I understand why, they will blame schools. When I talk to school administrators and school teachers, who are some of the most caring, wonderful people in the world, I love teachers so much that I've been married to one for 43 years. Okay. The teachers that I talk to, the school administrators that I talk to, the school board members that I talk to, and they're wrong because I'm looking out here. You know what they say? Parents are so apathetic. We just can't get them to show up for anything. Now you want to really change things where kids get their drugs, they don't get them at school. Where kids learn these things is at home. It's all that. So parents blame teachers and school administrators blame teachers. And while that's going on, what do you think we're teaching our young people? Not how to resolve conflicts, not how to communicate clearly. That doesn't help us when we're blaming each other. But let's just suppose I have a dream. I have a dream that there's a school district somewhere where teachers and school administrators and parents and board members can sit down and there's none of this blaming and everybody's working together and everybody's on the same page and everybody wants to see their kids be drug-free. And everybody say, hallelujah to that. So we're all happy about that. We're all working together. Pretty soon what will happen is the problem's not going to go away overnight. We're a plop, plop, fizz, fizz, quick fix society, and it's not going to go away overnight. So, let me see. If it's not the parents, and if it's not the teachers, then who is it? Must be the sheriff's department. Must be the local police. If they weren't so busy pulling me over for parking where I'm parking or, doing whatever they're doing, it's law enforcement. They're not doing their job. And I was glad to hear the shout out to the law enforcement folks here. Because my experience has been over 35 years, law enforcement professionals are very committed to, the prevention of alcohol, tobacco, and other drug abuse. They don't want this in the community any more than we do. So let's just say we bring in law enforcement. That's what's happening in this room and in this community. And law enforcement and parents and teachers are working together and everybody's communicating. And I can think of one district in northeastern Ohio in particular where that happened. The law enforcement folks were busting the students in the parking lot This was back a few years ago for selling drugs, and the school administrators were looking out the window scratching their heads. Today in that school district, everybody talks, everybody communicates, everybody works together. There's kind of a Monday morning report, between the school and the law enforcement folks. So let's just assume we get law enforcement, on the same page, and the parents and the police and the school administrators are all together. And the problem still doesn't go away. I've been trying to prevent this for 35 years, and maybe incrementally we've done some things, and we have, but this is a problem that's going to be with us, and we need to keep up the fight. So, must be somebody else. Oh, I know who it is. It's organized religion, that's who it is. For those of you that are grandparents in this room, it's all those liberal priests and ministers that we ordained back in the 70s. They just, we need some good basic values. How many of you know a youth pastor? Some of the most caring, wonderful, well-educated people you've ever met. And hopefully they're here tonight. They're part of this group. They're part of this committee. So we get, we get the clergy, and we get the religious, and we get the faithful involved with us. And the problem still doesn't go away. And pretty soon what we hear is, ain't it a shame? It must be Madison Avenue. Did you know, this was before the era of cyber education, that your kids will experience at least 80,000 do drug messages on TV before they graduate from high school? How many of you watch the Super Bowl? Yeah, unbelievable, the messages that young people are getting today. So pretty soon we say, ain't it a shame, it's Madison Avenue, there's nothing we can do about it, and we go back to sleep. And what I would share with you is, unfortunately, in many communities, that's the response. There's a crisis, everybody gets up in arms, everybody mobilizes. I've been in gymnasiums with 500-600 parents. 6 months later, it's a handful of folks. It's glad to hear that your community group here has been ongoing for over a decade. And a special shout out, I don't know if she's in the room, to my friend Mary Marvel, who I've known for over 20 years. I know Mary was a big part of this. So blaming is a big part of what goes on. And what happens when somebody gets blamed? What happens when somebody gets blamed is they're going to produce the data to support the evidence of your allegations about them. So the more we blame, the more we scapegoat sectors of our community, we're going to get more of that. So we all need to work together. We all need to be inclusive. Today, there's some technology, and it gets kind of cumbersome sometimes, but those of us who work like Steve and I do in this business, we need to look at what we call all 12 sectors of the community. We need to get, the clergy involved. We need to get the media involved. We need to get the parents involved. We need to get the youth involved. We need to get business involved. We need to get everybody in our community, youth serving organizations, elected officials, everybody involved. And when we do, and we continue to do that, the blaming will dissipate and things will get better in your community when you stop blaming. But it begins with you. So if you have any of those blaming attitudes, if you've ever done any of that, and I won't ask for a show of hands, but I'll speak for myself, there certainly are people that I blamed over my career. And the more that we do that, the worse it gets. The less we blame, the more we work together, the better it gets. See here. The second thing I want to talk about is the whole idea of that for some of us in this room at least, there might be an attitude in our mind that there's good drugs and there's bad drugs. And that's especially important today with this prescription epidemic that we're facing. And typically, for those of us that are old enough, the bad drugs, quote, are the ones that we don't understand. Heroin, crack cocaine, ecstasy. What are the good drugs? Alcohol, for some of us. Do you know, and again I was glad to hear about the Parents Who Host Lose the Most campaign that you're doing here. There are still, even with the prescription epidemic, more years of potential life lost in this country because of alcohol than every other drug combined. But for many of us, alcohol is an okay drug. What about tobacco? For some people, well, they're only smoking. 425,000 preventable tobacco-related deaths this year in our society. Why is that okay? We had this was in the Youngstown Vindicator, our newspaper. It was on the TV station, so I'm not breaking anybody's anonymity here. But we had a local high school who won the state football championship. And they went back, which is their tradition. They've won it many times and rang the victory bell. This year was champagne and cigars. Students on the property of the school. What kind of a message does that send? And nobody got punished. I mean, I'm not for punishment, but I'm for, if there's policies and rules, there ought to be consequences.
Was that the coaches and the players?
I don't know, Mindy. I'm not sure about that, but it was, yeah. Some of the parents, again, they were well-intentioned because it was part of their culture. Well, we've always smoked cigars and drank champagne when we rang the victory bell, but it hit the media this year, and it's been front page on our newspaper. What kind of a message does that send? But for a lot of parents, they really feel that. Well, it's okay if we just. If they're drinking at our house, we'll take the keys. No, not a good idea. The prefrontal cortex in the human brain doesn't get fully formed until you're in your mid-20s. So telling a young person that they can drink is like saying, here's the keys to the Maserati. It goes 190, but don't drive it that fast. It's not going to happen that way. So, more years of potential life lost because of alcohol, 425,000 preventable tobacco-related deaths. What's the other drug for a lot of us that's really okay? And it's illegal. Marijuana? Yeah, well, it's just weed. It's practically harmless. It's recreational. There's no problem there. We did it back in the 70s, and many of us have our excuses. Okay, but it's a very dangerous drug. The average marijuana smoker today is smoking something called a blunt, not a joint. And each blunt has about 7 times as many carcinogens in it as a joint. And the young people that we're treating that are cannabis dependent at the Neil Kennedy Recovery Clinic in Dublin or in Youngstown or in Holland, those young people on average are smoking, if they're cannabis dependent, 4 to 6 blunts a day. So I'm just trying to do the math, how many cigarettes that would be in terms of carcinogens and tar. So my point is, folks, we're going to see an epidemic of throat cancer, mouth cancer, lung cancer, esophageal cancer. Not to mention that it is a brain disease, and the tetrahydrocannabinol marijuana does affect the brain. But again, what we're seeing, why I ask about parents and grandparents, for the first time in history, in what we do, we're seeing 3 generations of the same family cannabis dependent. And typically for us at the Neil Kennedy Recovery Clinic, we may be treating a young person, say 14, 15 years old, that's been smoking marijuana for 3 or 4 years. And the reason we're treating them is because they were busted somehow. Juvenile court picked them up doing something, and we're treating that person and trying to get them sober. But mom and dad are walking on eggshells in this family. Why is that? Because they're smoking too? And they're righteously indignant because the little brat didn't save a joint for grandpa. Go figure. So 3 generations of the same family addicted to marijuana. The addiction problems, the accidents, the chronic health problems, not good drugs at all. And now, since 2007 at least, we've begun to track this. Prescription medications are huge. Again, like I said, 4 Ohioans dying this year, more accidental prescription overdose deaths than even car crashes. It's just unbelievable what's going on. The customer profile being 18 to 25 and getting younger and younger and younger. So, when we're looking at drugs and when we're looking at community responses and community policy, we need to talk about everything across the spectrum. And how early do you start talking to young people about these issues? It's never too early. There's a lot of research on that. There's a very famous research project out of Perry, Michigan. 4-year-olds can respond to these messages. What's safe versus unsafe? What's a drug versus what's a medicine? Who can give it to you? There's things like that young people need to know. There's no age that's too early. But making judgments about drugs is one of the things in our society that has kept us sicker than we need to be. So we need to step back, take a look at that, and talk about all of it. Okay, we couldn't find the remote here, so I'm pushing the button. My finger's getting sore already. No, just kidding. Making judgments about kids, about young people. Now, if I were to ask for a show of hands, or ask you, are there any bad kids really? Most of you, because you're here and because you showed up and because you have a heart for young people, would say to me, no, there's no bad kids. All kids are good kids. Some kids just need a little more love. Some kids just need a little more direction. You know, in fact, there's many of us in this room who just love working with those young people that are challenging and difficult. You know, we love those kids. So no such thing as bad kids, right? You all agree? Can I see heads? No bad kids? But let me tell you something. Where we make that decision isn't in our head. It's right here. And I'll get real personal with this. I'll go back more than 25 years to when my daughter was a teenager. And somebody knocks on the door. And it's, oh, let's just say Brian. What do I do? Hi, is Kelly there? Bam! Come back when you're 35. Did I make that decision here? No, I made it right here. Because I know all about Brian, and I know all about Brian's family, and I've heard all about Brian. You know, so I don't want Brian to have anything to do with my daughter Kelly. Okay? That's not a head decision, that's a heart decision. A couple days later, a young man shows up, knocks on my door, and it's Matt. Oh, hey Matt, come on in. Yeah, hey Kelly, Matt's here. You know, how you doing, Matt? How's your dad? How's your mom? Well, I know Matt, and I know Matt's parents, and they go to my church, and you know. But what if Matt's the one who's using drugs? What if Matt's the one that's not a good influence? Did I make that decision from here? No, I probably made it from here. And oh, by the way, Matt's a good kid, and you know he was just holding that marijuana for a friend. He would never do that. You know, and that good kid, bad thing happens in families. It happens in communities. It happens in schools. Some kids, I call it the hello Mr. Cleaver, the Eddie Haskell syndrome. For those of you that are old enough, some kids can just get over on us because they're so charming. And again, good kids and bad kids. Again, the difficulty there is the kids that we quote judge as bad from our heart. What we tend to do with them, whether we're a school administrator or an addiction counselor, or a law enforcement professional, or a parent, or anything, we tend to hold those young people accountable for their behaviors, don't we? Because they screwed up, and they're gonna pay the price. But what about a state championship football player that smokes cigars and drinks champagne on the school premises? Well, boys will be boys. No big deal. Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, what I want to suggest to you is maybe, just maybe, we're literally loving our good kids to death because we're not holding them as accountable as we would hold our bad kids. So what we need to look at in schools and communities, in terms of the law enforcement system, is making sure that everybody gets justice in the same way, make sure that everybody is served the same way. Tough love. Say what you mean what you say. And again, this whole blaming thing really affects young people. Because if a young person gets scapegoated just because they've got a black t-shirt on or blue hair or body piercings, if everybody's pointing the finger at that young person, again, more likely than not, what they'll do is, again, like I said earlier, produce the data to support the evidence of your allegations about them. That sort of person deserves whatever. So we need to step back and take a look at this. How in our communities are we judging young people? Are we judging drugs? Are we blaming? And again, it happens everywhere to one degree or another. And to every degree that we can stop it, we're going to see some health. Because every day that a young person doesn't use alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs is a day of health. Every day they don't do that is a day we're celebrating. Keeping secrets. In my business, this is one of the deadliest things that can happen. Keeping secrets is what keeps people sick. And one of the things that we want to see happen is honesty and truth and people talking about what's going on. And between moms and dads and grandparents and children, this level of honesty, I think, is very, very important. I started myself doing parenting programs back in the late 1970s up in Youngstown, Ohio. We go into little churches on Sunday night and we do systematic training for effective parenting and other types of parenting programs. Strengthening Families is a program we do today. I love to do parent education programs, and the hallmark of every parent education program that I've ever seen is tell the truth to your children. Have honest communication with your children. Expect them to be honest with you. Communicate your values. Do you want your son or daughter to decide on their values based on the values of some unruly peer group? Or do you want them to decide on their values about using drugs based on your family values? Which is it? And I could get very evangelical about that. And I'd say, for God's sakes, have the conversation. Talk to your young people. Okay? Tell them how you feel. Same way with sex. About the same time that young people are going to make decisions about using alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, they're going to make the same kind of decisions about whether to be sexually active or not. Same issue applies. Do you want that value to be communicated by a peer group or by a young person whose values are inconsistent with your values, or do you want it to come out of your family? Of course you want it to come out of your family, right? So have that conversation. Talk about it. Talk early, talk often. You can't talk enough. Make sure the young people in your family, the young people that you love, understand what your values are. Parental disapproval, according to all the research in the world, is one of the biggest predictors of drug-free, sexually abstinent youth. You know, the more you communicate that value, the more likely you are to get across to young people. So with that being said, again, another true story. I come home one day from work. My wife's teaching school, and she's got a parent-teacher conference that night. And I see something, a word, on my daughter's notebook that changed everything in our family. One word, Jimmy, on the notebook. Jimmy written in pen on the hand. Jimmy on the jeans. Jimmy on the phone. Jimmy over at our house. My daughter's 14. She's beautiful. She's just a wonderful child. But I'm starting to get this knot in my stomach. And then I'm remembering what I just told you and what I told every parent group I've ever talked to for 30 years. So I screwed up my courage. Big mistake, by the way. I'll tell you why later. Tiptoed up the stairs. There I stand with my master's degree and my prevention certificate and all of my book learning and all of my knowledge, and I knock on my daughter's door. She says, "Come in, Daddy," and she's sitting on her bed doing her homework. And I look at her and I say, "Honey, I think it's about time we have a talk about Kelly, can we talk about You want to talk about sex, Dad? Yeah. I'm not doing it." Okay. Hearts pounding. That was more than 25 years ago. And I still remember that. I was scared to death. So I had instant empathy with every parent in this room and every parent in the world who's been afraid, to talk. Because good God, what if I asked that question and I got an answer I couldn't handle? What would I do with that? Today I know, but I didn't then. And we'll talk about what to do. But it's keeping secrets that keeps people sick. And it's fear very often that makes that happen. Teachers and guidance counselors and school administrators and clergy and law enforcement professionals and neighbors. Sometimes it really takes a lot of courage to screw your courage up and confront a situation and do it openly and honestly. Some of us are just conflict avoidant. It's pretty hard for us to do. But again, have the conversation, have the conversation, have the conversation. Now, the mistake I made, by the way, do you know what it was? I did it by myself. I should have been together on the same page with my wife. We should have had the conversation first, then we should have went upstairs and had the conversation in a non-accusatory, open dialogue with our daughter. But I got so scared and so panicked, I ran up the stairs that night and tried to fix the situation. So, again, not going to beat myself up for it, but again, it's fear a lot of times that stops us from doing what we need to do. So find some other people like yourself. There's a whole group of parents and grandparents in this room who are committed to the young people in this community. Certainly there's other people in this room who are going through some of the same things you are. So what a wonderful place to learn. The last thing I want to talk about before I start to give you some suggestions is one of the mistakes we've made historically is doing things to, for, and at our young people instead of with them. Now, I don't know about any of you, but if you do something to me, I'm going to have a feeling about that. And what's that feeling going to be? Yeah, I want to push back. Okay. If you do something for me, what message are you sending me? That I'm not capable of doing it myself. Okay? And that becomes learned helplessness. I know all about that. You know, I know all about that. As a husband of 43 years. How do you cook that egg, honey? Yeah. And she says to me, where's the lawnmower? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, if you do something for somebody, you're sending them a message that they're not capable of doing it themselves. And if you do something at somebody, you know, I don't know, you know, whether it's fight or flight, whether I want to get angry or whether I want to run away and feel worthless. So the key is to do things with people. And, you know, I think that, you know, for a lot of families today, that's quite a challenge. Generationally speaking, 3 or 4 generations ago, families had to do things with each other. It was economically necessary that, you know, people shared in the chores, shared in the duties, shared in the responsibilities. In this day and age, with a lot of moms and dads working and young people being, you know, pretty autonomous, you know, that ability to work together and do things together isn't as apparent as it used to be. I'm a big believer in chores. You know, I think it's a good idea to assign chores and then to reward from them. I think, you know, a modest allowance, you know, and doing chores, I think that's a good thing. My son David, who's now 39, is one of the best. You know, whenever he comes home, he likes to do the laundry, and he irons better than I'll ever iron. You know, his mother and I taught him that. You know, he can cook. You know, my daughter, it took some doing, but she knows how to run the lawnmower. She knows where the garbage can is. She knows how to do those kind of chores. So doing things together and valuing and being grateful, you know, to your children that they can actually contribute with you. As simple as it sounds, and our former First Lady, Hope Taft, you know, has said this on many occasions, even the act of having dinner together. I don't want to see a show of hands, but there's probably a lot of us in this room for whom it's very hard even to sit down and have a meal, you know, as a family. So making time for that, those kind of rituals, I think, are very, very important. And you know, family meetings, I'm a big believer in that. Most parenting programs that I'm aware of suggest the whole idea of holding family meetings, and, you know, there's structures for that, there's ways to do that. So in my family, we started doing family meetings when our kids were pre-adolescent and adolescent, and they just kind of sit there, you know, on Friday afternoon after school, whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Until one day, my daughter called me up at work. And she said, hey, Dad, are we going to have a family meeting tonight? And I said, it's Friday, isn't it? She said, yes. And so, okay, we're going to have a family meeting. She said, good, because I'm going to turn 16 pretty soon, and I'd like to talk about my driver's license, you know, and my driving privileges. In other words, it was relevant. Okay, it was relevant. So we've got to have the conversations. You know, we've got to do things with youth. One of the stories, and again, I hope this doesn't happen to any of you here in Olentangy, but it happened back in my hometown when my daughter was graduating from high school, and I just want to share this story too. She came to me her senior year in high school, and she said, Dad, I know you and Mom are planning a graduation party for me. I said, that's right, honey. You're our firstborn child. We love you. We're so proud of you. Yes, we're going to have a graduation party for you before we send you off to college in Atlanta. And she said, I wish you wouldn't. And I said, what? And she said, come on, Dad. Everybody knows what you do for a living. And I said, and Kelly, your point is? She said, there won't be any beer. I said, that's right, honey. You know that. She said, so nobody will come. I was heartbroken. I was just heartbroken. I marched down, you talk about blaming, marched down to the superintendent's office, read him the riot act, said we got to get our parents together. We sent a letter out to all the parents in our community. There were only about 100 graduates. I come from a little community called Columbiana up by Youngstown. Letter went out to 100 parents. They all sent pledges back. We promised promised on paper to have alcohol-free parties, and I felt really righteous and good. We live right across the street from where the Firestone Park in Columbiana, where the graduation ceremony was. My wife's a teacher in the district. My daughter's very popular. All the kids come over, and our backyard is full, you know, right after the graduation ceremony. But what I didn't notice at first was everybody was looking uncomfortable. And after about 15 minutes, my backyard was empty. And it was just my mother-in-law and my daughter and my son and my wife, and enough cold cuts and enough lemonade, you know, and enough pizza to last for 6 months. And unfortunately, where do you think the young people went? To the houses where the beer was. I hope that's my wish for you here in Olentangy, that doesn't happen in your district this year. Persistence, perseverance, having the conversation, not just in the family, but in the community. Norms change, attitudes change. 5 years later, my son graduated from high school. It was the same deal almost exactly, except this time all the young people came and they stayed, and we played you know, horseshoes and all kinds of things, and had a really good alcohol-free time at a graduation. But the trick was we rented an alcohol-free park to do it too, so everybody knew what the rules were. So doing things with and communicating with young people is very, very important. So what else can we do? The first thing we can do is really educate ourselves as much as we can about, you know, the contemporary alcohol, tobacco, and other drug issues. I've repeated this a couple times this evening, you know, to different people, and I apologize if I repeat this story, but it's worth it. My medical director and I were at a parent program in another community not too far from here, just a few years ago. And this group was insistent that the medical director and I only talk to those parents about alcohol, because they didn't have problems with any other drugs. Okay, and I'm just looking at your faces. Things have changed a lot in a couple years. But we really need to learn as much as we can about what's going on today in our community. There was a wonderful gentleman, his name was Eric Hoffer. He was born in 1900, he died in 1987, so he's been gone for a while. Eric Hoffer grew up during the Great Depression. He was a person himself who really struggled, you know, with alcohol, with mental health issues, with suicidal tendencies. He was a person who never thought he would amount to anything. But what happened to Eric Hoffer during World War II was he went to California and became a longshoreman and discovered something in California that we all take for granted. It was called a library. And he began to read, and he began to read, and he began to read, and he began to write. And Jimmy Carter bestowed upon him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And in his autobiography, he made this statement. He said, in times of change, learners will inherit their full potential, while the learned, that is to say those of us in the room who think we already know it all, are beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. The whole world is changing so fast. All of this information, you know, some of it's hidden in plain sight right in front of us. And that's a program we do, by the way. I don't know if you've done it here yet, but you know, what a typical adolescent's bedroom might look like, you know, and where drugs can be hidden and how easy it is to see. Things are changing so quickly today that, and where young people get information, it's just incredible. I'm kind of old school because I'm 65 years old. One of my supervisees called me one day last summer to tell me she couldn't come in to work that day. She was sick. She was stung by a bee, and she, you know, was allergic to that bee sting, so she had to stay home and take care of herself. The way she had to tell me, unfortunately, was she called and left me a voicemail message. By the time I got to the office, everybody on my staff knew already. How? Not text, although that could have been that. She posted it on her Facebook page. I didn't know how to access that, but everybody else knew. You know, everything that's going on with respect to social media today, you know, the information that young people are getting, we need to be as savvy about that as we can be, and we need to understand as much as we can, you know, about the issues, you know, with alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, and what the world is like for our young people today. I don't think I'm going to have time to show this. I'm not sure how this is going to work out. I think there's some folks here from Cardinal Health. There's a wonderful they've got a wonderful program. I went to their internet site. Steve, are you aware of that? Okay. And there's great PowerPoints, great information, stuff you can educate yourself about, stuff you can take out and educate others about. It's just incredible how much good information is out there, that we can use. And I downloaded that PowerPoint. I've got it here if there's enough time. We can talk about that later. But what we can do is learn. We can learn, and we need to never stop learning as parents and grandparents, because again, the world is changing so quickly that we need to do everything we can do to stay up with it. I've already alluded to this. Have the conversation, have the conversation, have the conversation, have the conversation. Don't be afraid to speak up. I'm not sure if the billboards are down here in central Ohio, but up in northeastern Ohio, there's a wonderful billboard up that says you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Okay? Have the conversation. Don't be afraid to communicate, what your values are to your young people. Don't be afraid of that. Talk early, talk often. Again, the number one predictor of drug-free youth, of sexually abstinent youth, is family values and family communication. That's more important. Sometimes by the time our young people get to high school or even middle school anymore, we think we've lost them. We don't think they're listening, but they are. We need to have the conversation. I'm a big believer, again, like I said, family meetings, discussing issues openly. As often as we can and as early as we can. And if you need some tips on how to do that, again, there's local professionals that can help you with that. Last thing I want to share, and it's what's happening right here, is if you don't know what else to do, and if you're feeling really frustrated and hopeless, don't be afraid to ask for help. There's lots of people that have walked in your shoes. Heard a couple stories, from a few of you, that spoke before me about how this is an issue that's impacting every one of us. Don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to ask for support. Don't be afraid to call, the local professionals, whether it's, the Alcohol, Drug, and Mental Health Board or Neil Kennedy Recovery Clinic or somebody else. It doesn't matter who. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to call the school and ask for help. The more that we can link up and the more that we can support each other, the healthier we're going to become. There's a wonderful story. Again, my wife, besides being a teacher, is a storyteller and an artist. And this particular story appears in one form or another in almost every indigenous culture. And the way I'm going to tell this story actually comes from the Hasidic. It's an old Jewish teaching tale. And it's a story about a rabbi, as the story goes, who was so holy that he was in dialogue with God on a daily basis. And one day, God and the rabbi were discussing heaven and hell and what's the difference, and is there such a place anyway? And I don't know about you, but I'm at least mildly curious. I'd like to know that. So anyway, God and the rabbi are having this discussion, and the rabbi, it just wasn't connecting. And so God, being the wise teacher God is, says, "Look, Rabbi, I will show you, I will teach you." And he led him into this magnificent room, this giant banquet hall with big crystal chandeliers, bigger than this room, big crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, ornate tapestries on the wall, plush carpeting, these big tables laid out in the finest linens and gold and silver. And right in the middle of each table was this big golden bowl just full of this most nourishing stew. And just like the old Prego commercial, the rabbi understood that stew, it was in there. That stew contained everything that the people in the room needed to be plump. It was in there. And everybody had the means to access it. They had a long-handled spoon so they could dip in, and get something to eat and be nourished physically, emotionally, spiritually. But what would happen in this room was that the pushing, the shoving, the crowding, the trying to get to that bowl was so horrendous that if you could fight your way through, and finally get there and lunge in and get some of that stew, almost always, the pushing and the shoving and the crowding, it was just incredible. None of it hit the mouth. And the suffering in that room was incredible. And because the God of my understanding is merciful, what he quickly did as soon as the rabbi understood that was he led him out of the room, down the hall, into another room. And when the rabbi came into this room, what he experienced was just sheer joy. The people in this room were plump, physically, emotionally, spiritually plump. And as the rabbi studied the room, he saw the same chandeliers, the same tapestries, the same plush carpet, the same big tables, with fine linens and gold and silver, the same big bowl full of the most nourishing stew that had everything in it that was in there that the people needed to be plump, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and they were. And then when he studied these happy, plump, joyous people, he noticed they all had a little belt clip with a long-handled spoon on it. He said, God, now you've really gone and confused me. This room is exactly the same. The setup here is really exactly the same, but there must be some difference. What is it? And God finally spoke and said, Rabbi, the difference is here they have learned to feed each other. Here they have learned to feed each other. So they're not blaming each other. They're not making judgments. They're not keeping secrets. They're working together. Here they have learned to feed each other. My boss, who's a very wise man, once taught me you can't know yourself by yourself. We need each other, if we're going to be a community. If we're going to use that word community, we need each other, because this is an issue that isn't going to go away, prescription drug abuse, on its own. It's going to require us all to work together and put all those other things aside to make that happen. And if my boss, Jerry Carter, and this wise acidic teaching tale don't get to you, there's one guy that will. You see him up there on the slide. Actually, it's Piglet. Do y'all know Piglet? Okay. Piglet said it best, that great scientist, that great empiricist Piglet. He said, it's hard to be brave. It's hard to be brave, said Piglet, sniffing slightly, when you're only a very small animal. And aren't we all? And then Piglet said the magic words, sometimes it's easier to be brave with two, or a whole community, banding together like you have for a decade, to do the things that you do. So that's what I would share with you. Blaming is not going to go away overnight, but we can all do our part. Making judgments about young people, making judgments about drugs, keeping secrets, doing things to, for, and at people. Sometimes that's part of the human condition, and I still catch myself doing that. That's why I teach this lecture sometimes, so that I can remember. But if we educate ourselves, and if we have the conversation, and if we reach out and connect and support each other, things will get better. So the last thing I want to share before I sit down is just to invite you to reach out your right hand if you're willing. Just like singing to the choir here. Give yourself a pat on the back for being here. Okay, and thank you.
Thank you, Doug. We're now going to turn it over to Mindy and Craig and Valerie Connolly. Bear with me. She is with the Ohio Department of Alcohol and Drug Addiction Services, better known as ODADIS. Longest acronym I've ever heard of. She started with ODADIS in March of 2007. She graduated from Ohio University and holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. She's a licensed chemical dependency counselor, and she's been working in the field of corrections, community mental health, drug and alcohol counseling for over 10 years. Now, you've all met Mindy. We'll have a talk about this later, as a stay-at-home mom. Don't do it. And on the weekends, she celebrated a 10-year anniversary of being co-anchor on NBC4 with Marshall McPeak. So Mindy, let us know what Channel 4 has going on.
I keep losing my microphone, imagine that. I do want to tell you what Channel 4 is doing, because, as I said earlier, I am really proud of our station for taking a role in really trying to fight this. And we heard it mentioned a couple times, it is an epidemic. And you're right, you should get a pat on your back for being here, because it starts at home. And if you don't get involved with your kids' lives, it's just going to be a horrible situation. I am a stay-at-home mom, and I'm not going to change my mind. Sorry, I'm there. I am not only am I a stay-at-home mom, I'm probably a little bit too much involved. My son's 10, my daughter's 9, so they're in 3rd and 4th grade for the past couple of years. I'm their lunch lady at their school. Right now, they love it. They think it's cool. Middle school, they'll probably be like, Mom, can you leave us alone? We don't want you around anymore. But I bet I'm a lot like you ladies and gentlemen. Too bad. My kids are stuck with me. And kudos to every single one of you for being here. Great job. What NBC4 is doing, perhaps you saw Craig and I did a little spot. It's like a public service announcement that periodically runs just to better educate people. And I think that is key. Education is key. We cannot stay in the dark with this. We cannot ignore it because it's happening, whether we like it or not. So we've done the PSA announcements. We have done countless stories at NBC4. And we have an online push. You watch our website, you go on our website, you can look up past stories that so many of our anchors and reporters have done attacking the problem. Because the more people know, the more they can change their own lives. I want to tell you something else. I've got a date written down here because the recent thing we've been doing is a lot of people have old medication in their cabinets. Well, the thing that's happening with those old medications, teenagers are getting in mom and dad's medicine cabinets, they're grinding it up, and they're one way or another putting it in their system. And we are doing what's called their drug disposal events. No questions asked. You simply drive up and you drop off your old prescriptions. I was talking to some of the sheriff's deputies who sponsored the last one we did. They collected medication from the 80s. I know, I see you going, wow, you're right. What would we have, why in our right minds would we have that in our medicine cabinet from the 80s? That's back when I was in high school. That's crazy. So it's a wonderful thing that our station is doing to get people involved and get rid of that stuff because it's not doing any good in there. And your kids are going to find it. And they just may experience it with it. Can't have that. Can't have that. Write this date down, or at least put it, it's not till April, but that is our next drug disposal event. It will be on April 28th at Grove City. It's at the Kroger there, and that's on Stringtown Road. And we are doing these different school parent programs, and like I said, the online resource. This was our first event that we have kicked off. We started with you guys at Olentangy. Next week we're going to be in Dublin, and then in March we'll be in Hilliard. But this, as far as our involvement with NBC4, it couldn't have been possible without Boehringer Ingelheim. They really came to us and asked us to fight this epidemic with them. So thank goodness we have them on all of our side, and we will be your station committed to you to fight this epidemic. It's up to all of you to make a difference in our kids' lives. Dublin is, Jana, do you know which date? February 15th will be in Dublin, at Dublin Kaufman. And then do you know the date for next month? Oh yeah, that's my birthday, that's why I couldn't do it. March 20th, that's right. Craig, did you want to come down here? Craig Krenzel, you guys remember Craig Krenzel, National Championship Ohio State Buckeyes. Most athletes, after their playing days, they gain some weight, they don't look as good. Not Craig, you look outstanding, fit and trim and everything.
It's because I'm standing next to you. Baby.
We've got some feedback, so I'll sit down. Craig, you take it away what you want to talk about.
Maybe it's just me. No, thank you. Thank you guys for allowing me to be here this evening and just to be a part of this program. And I sat in the back there and listened to the presentations this evening, and I don't know about you guys, but those figures are staggering. Mindy made the comment when she was up here earlier, as the mother of younger children, that if you'd have told her the challenge that it presented 10 years ago, she wasn't sure if she'd have did it. And forgive me, I take the exact opposite approach. I look at it and think, my wife and I, we have been blessed with 3 beautiful, happy, healthy children, ages 6, 3.5, and 18 months. And I look at it and say, I look at that challenge and what that means and the impact that we can have in the lives of our children, and how powerful and how important that is. And I look at it and say, you know what, this is just my personality, I'm ready. I'm ready to attack that challenge. As I think most of you, if not all of you in this room here this evening, share that same mindset. And for that, you are to be commended. For your commitment, for even being here this evening. As the father of young children, I thank you. I thank you for the involvement that you have in your children's lives, in the lives of other children in our community, and what that can mean. And I've been very blessed, very, very blessed, very fortunate to have been able to fall into the right positions, luck my way into the right decisions, to wake up one day and growing up in Sterling Heights, Michigan, and see I come to the age of reason, make my way down to Columbus, Ohio, attend The Ohio State University, and be blessed enough to enjoy everything that comes with the opportunity for playing football at a place like Ohio State. And what a great opportunity that's been. And what I've really enjoyed is things like this after my career has been over, to get around and interact with, thank people, and be a part of programs that can really help impact the lives of other people in our community, regardless of what the age is. And to me, that's the most powerful thing about playing the game of football. I'm always asked, what's my favorite thing about playing football? And I always tell parents that the game of football will prepare children from the youngest age, at the very minute they first start playing, till the minute they're done, whether they're a multimillionaire coming out of the NFL, or they got a college education, or they stopped after high school. The game of football prepares us for every walk of life, and the challenges that are going to be thrown our way, and the things that I've learned and seen through my time playing football have really helped shape me and mold me into the person that I am today. And I wanted to just take a few minutes and share a few stories. We're obviously here learning and understanding what it takes and what our commitment needs to be to have an impact in not just our kids' lives, but in the lives of other people in our community of various ages. And obviously, as a football player, I would be lying to you if I were to say that I've never seen or been exposed to prescription medication. You get your body twisted, torn, ripped, broken into positions that I am so thankful that I don't ever have to deal with ever again, hopefully. And with that, obviously, comes medical treatment of various types, surgeries, treatments, rehabs. I've been exposed to, I've been prescribed prescription medications. I've used prescription medications in accordance to whatever my doctors told me. And when I was in college, I was pretty naive. We're here tonight and we're hearing all these stories, we're hearing all these frightening figures with prescription drug abuse. But I was kind of naive. I thought, that doesn't really happen. And the first time I had a knee surgery, I had guys saying, hey, did they get you any pills? And I immediately dismissed it. I said, well, yes, but they're all gone. It was 4 or 5 days after surgery, and they don't give us too many. And but when I got to the NFL, and this is a story that I will never, ever forget. And, we heard the figures, 18 to 25 years old, well-educated, the bright, the young, the people that we would look at and say, wow, they really got a good future. And they're the ones that are chemically dependent. They're the ones with the issues. And as I stand up here today, I interacted with guys that had been to college. Many of them graduated, making 7 figures a year, and dealing with some of these same issues. And I will not share any names, but one story, I was playing with the Chicago Bears. I was a rookie in Chicago, and I was fortunate/unfortunate enough to have to play my rookie year. And we were playing in New York City, in the Meadowlands, playing the Giants, the Super Bowl Giants. It was my rookie year. Eli Manning actually was a rookie this past weekend, Super Bowl MVP. And we went into the Meadowlands, and I'm often asked, what was the hardest hit that I've ever taken playing football? And the answer is, without a doubt, the simplest answer, the simplest question that I've ever answered, because it was in New York, in the Meadowlands, that Sunday, where I experienced the hardest hit. And it was from the lovely helmet of a future Hall of Famer named Michael Strahan. Anyone in here ever heard Michael Strahan? He's kind of a big guy. And it was a screen pass, so I was dropping back and I was trying to hold the ball as long as I could. I flipped the ball to Anthony Thomas. Play actually went for like 65 yards. It was a great play. And clean play, clean hit. Michael Strahan put his helmet right here into my chest, drove me right down into the ground. And as I laid on the ground, I realized that I couldn't breathe. And I realized when I moved, I had this really sharp pain on my left side, kind of right in here. As I rolled over and tried to gasp my breath, I wiped the tear out of my eye. I scraped myself up off the ground. And I looked at Michael Strahan and I said, "Is that all you got?" I think it was a little louder than that. I'm not sure. I know he heard me though. But I could barely breathe. This was before all of the focus on concussions. The birds were flying, the bells were ringing in my helmet, and I jogged down the field, called the next play, and 2 plays later that season, Michael Strahan tore his bicep in that game. And he was talking some trash to me after he hit me when I said, "Is that all you got?" as I was darn near in tears. And 2 plays later, he tears his bicep. And he's like walking off the field, and I jawed some comment at him, and he kind of looked at me with this death stare. So I kind of walked right back to the huddle and stood by my guys. But long and the short of it is, after that game, I could not move, I could not breathe. If I sneezed or coughed, I cried, I couldn't take a deep breath. I had a cracked rib and separated, cartilage off my rib. And if anyone's ever dealt with anything like that, it is hands down. I've had knee surgery, I've had elbow surgeries, most painful thing I've ever dealt with. And the doctors, understanding that pain through x-rays and seeing what I was dealing with, prescribed me some medication. They gave me 5 pain pills. That was all. Wow. Is it like a lot? That was supposed to last. That was all I got. I couldn't go in 3 days later and get more. So they gave me 5 pills. Take them one at a time, and there was a prescription, and the little bottle had all the directions and when I was supposed to take them, take with food. So I had 5 Vicodin. And they gave me 1 in the locker room, and then I had a little bottle full of 5. And we were on the plane, on the way back, flying back from the Meadowlands. We won the game, by the way. And first guy comes up to me, "Hey, Kranz, you doing all right?" I said, "Yeah, I'll be all right." "Hey, Kranz, doctors give you any pills?" I said, "Yeah. Can I get some?" "No. No, I need to take these to be able to sleep. I'm not giving you these pills. It's not the right thing to do. They were prescribed to me." I was in so much pain, it kept going. And I had about a half a dozen guys. And people, if I told you their names, a couple of them, you'd say, "Oh, I've heard of that guy. I've heard of that player." I even had one guy offer me $100 a pill. So I'll give you $500. These guys are, to them, don't get me wrong, $500 is not a ton of money. I was in so much pain, it wouldn't have mattered if they offered me $1 million a pill. I wasn't giving them up. But it just goes to show us that it's everywhere. These guys are multi-million-dollar athletes who their job is predicated on how they take care of their body. And they're trying to bum prescription medication. They're trying to get narcotics. It's not just where we think we need to look. It's everywhere, as we've been talking about all night. It is a serious epidemic. And the second story I'd like to share is on a personal note. I know you guys we've all sat here this evening, and kind of everybody that stepped there has had a personal story about prescription medication. I kind of, now I find mine a little humorous. So bear with me as I tell the story, as you look for the humor and the irony. But my brother, I have an older brother who is 5 years my senior. My older brother Brian is an orthopedic surgeon in Hickory, North Carolina. He played football and did his undergrad education at Duke University. And for those of you that are wondering, yes, Duke does have a football team. His junior year, they went defeated, 0-11. We always joke, because my junior year we went undefeated, 14-0. His junior year they were defeated. But here's my brother. On his 21st birthday, he had just had knee surgery himself, bad knees running the family. His birthday's in November, so it was the middle of the season, he hurt his knee, and he had just had knee surgery, and the doctors gave him a prescription for pain pills, and he was at home in his apartment, and just took a pill around 7:30, got a call from some of his buddies, said, "Hey Brian, we're coming by, we're going to cheer you up. We know you're sore, you're tired, but we also know, hey, it's your birthday, so we want to spend some time together." So a couple of his buddies, who, one of them, also now a doctor, comes over to my brother's apartment. This was, a few days after his surgery. They convince him to go out. It's his 21st birthday, to go out and just have a beer for his birthday. And one beer turned into 2, and he had 3 beers that night. and he had taken one pain pill a little bit earlier. This is my brother, the doctor. He's a junior in a pre-med, in the pre-med curriculum at Duke University. I know you guys are thinking, what an idiot. I'm not seeing him. If I need my knee replaced, I ain't going to see Brian Krenzel, MD. Because I'm thinking the same thing. But see, to me, the point is, I firmly believe, to this day, that my brother just didn't think about it. It wasn't on his mind. My brother, he had the whole world, in front of him. He was a football player. He had a college education. He was in the middle of getting one of the best college degrees you can get in this country. And it was for free. The last thing he needed to do was to be at the hospital at 1 o'clock in the morning while they're calling my parents telling them that we have your son here pumping his stomach because he was violently ill because he mixed alcohol with prescription painkillers because he was an idiot. To this day, we still laugh and kind of joke about it, that he just wasn't thinking about it. It wasn't on his mind. You've heard us talk about education here all evening and how important that communication was. And I was driving over here thinking about sharing that story. I called my mom. I said, hey Mom, do you remember when Brian had to go to the hospital in college and get his stomach pumped? My mom says, what did you do? I said, no, Mom. I just had a question for you. I said, when that happened, what was the first thing that you and Dad thought when you got the call that night, after you got through the initial shock? And she said, well, the first thing that we thought of is, this guy's going to be a doctor? I said, all right, Mom, what's the second thing you thought of? And she said something that, it just fits so perfect with what we're here to talk about and really celebrate in your all's commitment here this evening. My mom said something that really just kind of drove the point home. She said, it was just something that your dad and I never really talked to you guys about. And it really made sense because they didn't. I never had a talk with my mom. Hey, if you go out and have a couple of beers, don't have a painkiller. I didn't really have to because I saw my brother do it. And I saw what that looks like. He was 21 years old. I was only 16. I had never had a pain pill at that point. Hadn't had a drink of alcohol in my life. But I saw what it could do. So I kind of learned from other people's mistakes. But it's so important that commitment and that line of communication that has to stay open, not just with our children, but with other people, with everybody, on all of the pressing issues. Because, there are so many things. I always I sit there with my wife, Beth, and, we talk every night, as married couples should, and our kids, we'll put our children down to sleep, and we'll just talk about the day, and, sometimes one of our kids will do something, say something that's just kind of drives us crazy, and it's, it's part of being a parent. You all know what I'm talking about, but we have to educate our kids. We live in a world right now where it's just as important to teach our children the difference between the good and what they perceive as good. It's not just we have to teach them right from wrong and good and bad, but we have to teach them, what's really good versus what do they perceive as good and what a challenge that is. And how much interaction and communication that takes. And Beth and I will sit there and talk all the time about these things and have conversations with each other. Now our children aren't quite to the age that we can really engage in issues like this. If I looked at my son Braden and said, hey now, if anyone ever offers you a Vicodin, he's gonna be like, what, Daddy? Is that a cartoon? But the challenge and the challenges that we face as a society, the only way that we can help our children, that we can help each other, that we can help our communities and make them a safer place for all of us to live, that we can make our country better and more sound. We sit here and talk about all of the impacts that drugs and alcohol and prescription medications can have on society. Think of all of the adverse health effects and what that costs a year. And then you think about where we're at in our country in a healthcare system that's in turmoil, that's in need of fixing. The implications go far beyond the effect they can have on one individual. And I think that's the most important thing that every single one of us needs to understand is how important our involvement is to everybody else around us and how much that matters. And that's my experiences through the game of football, watching my brother go up, through having a broken rib and being prescribed pain pills and seeing what comes, and guys actually offering me money. As I mentioned, these guys have the whole world in the palm of their hands, making 7 figures a year, and abusing their bodies through dependencies and desires to go out there and get those medications. It truly is a serious problem, and it takes a lot of serious effort to come up with an answer, and we're all going to be part of that. And the only thing that I would urge you to do is take more action. As we look around this room this evening, it's great that you all are here. If I raised a hand and said, how many of you have friends? I'm pretty sure you'd all raise a hand. And how many of you have one friend that could be here? And if we all did that, how many more people there would be? That law of multiplication. It's truly a powerful tool. So that's going to be the challenge that I'd like to leave you with. You guys are involved, and that is great, and I thank you for that. But let's make sure we get other people involved. And I just want to leave you with that challenge. Thank you for allowing me to share a few stories, and turn it back over.
Valerie? Just so you know, we are going to have our raffle after Valerie's presentation, so you do need to be present to win. Just hold on a few minutes, and we'll have a short question and answer. So we'll have ushers walking between the aisles. If you want to pass your note cards, if you have questions, they'll come down and get them.
I will be short. Everybody talked about what I was going to talk about, so I applaud everybody. Doug, hi, I didn't get to see you beforehand. It's good to see you. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'm with the Ohio Department of Alcohol and Drug Addiction Services. We are a state agency under the direction of Governor Kasich and my director, Orman Hall, who have taken on the opiate epidemic in Ohio full force since they came into office. If you notice a display, we have the Don't Get Me Started campaign that was just launched 2 weeks ago. If you go to don'tgetmestarted.org, you'll find stories of how prescription drug abuse have affected many Ohioans. You'll see their stories. There's resources for treatment and also some prevention resources. Communication is the key. We've heard that all night. We have to talk to our young people. I'm a mother of a 3-year-old. I talk to her about healthy choices in hopes that that will continue to be with her as she becomes a teenager. I'm already worried about those years. 1 in 5 teens would say that they've taken prescription drugs that aren't theirs. 1 out of 5. And they're not getting them from drug dealers. They're not getting them, they're getting them from our medicine cabinets, from our family members, from friends and acquaintances. So one thing I want to touch on, it's important to secure your medications, put them in a place that's not easily accessible, and also keep track of how many pills you have. Mindy mentioned people had medication from the 80s. You're not going to know what you have if you leave it. Go to those drug take-back days. Those are wonderful efforts. Our department supports those as well. It's a great way to get rid of the medication. People familiar with farm parties? Is that a familiar term? Yeah, your kids are taking medicine from cabinets, taking it to a party, dumping it in a bowl, and just coming in and taking handfuls and taking them. They don't know what they're taking. They call them farm parties. Keep the medicine in secure places, because it's happening. I see jaws dropped. The first time I heard that term, I was like, well, I'm from the country. We used to have parties at farms, we have bonfires and stuff. And they're like, no, Valerie, no. Here's what it is, and that's happening. So those are the things that we need to educate ourselves with. As parents, I like what Craig said, share the message with other parents who maybe couldn't be here. Your friend, your children's friends, know who they are, know their parents. There's a wealth of information. I'm available anytime. My cards are at the table. Go to the partnership for drugfree.org. Wonderful resources for parents, teens, I just can't say enough about communicating and involving youth. I know Doug is like me. We love working with youth and young people. Empowering them to share this message as well, I think, is very important, because they're another piece of preventing this epidemic from continuing to grow. So there's resources for that as well. Doug and I would be happy to talk to you about Teen Institute or Youth to Youth, these wonderful programs that really empower teens to give back to their community and to educate their peers to make better choices. So with that, I'll let you get to your raffle. Thank you for having us. I love this. Thank you for being here. This is a huge step to help solve this problem, so thanks. It's good to see you.
So good to see you.
Doug was a very wonderful presenter, because I only have 3 questions, so it will be a very short question and answer, but very good questions. So definitely want you to address those. And I am that parent. I have had 2 alcohol-free graduation parties, and I'm going to have my 3rd one, and I challenge all of you to do it. I was kicking those kids out of my house last year at 2 o'clock in the morning. Go! So get a chocolate fountain. That's what made them stay. No alcohol, but a chocolate fountain. That works.
Hello. 3 questions. 2 of them are fairly easy. One of them is kind of challenging. What are the signs to look for? Somebody wants to know. First off, again, if you have the conversation, and you know your children, what the signs to look for is what's different. You know, some of the typical things are changes in friends, secretiveness, things that are missing, changes in behavior. You know, again, you know your own children, if they're usually up and excited and all of a sudden they seem morose and depressed, or the opposite. So, you know your own children, you look for differences, and again, have the conversation, don't be afraid to ask, and learn as much as you can. But that's the main thing. If you stop at our booth, Neil Kennedy booth, I think there's some pamphlets out there about signs and symptoms, and if I start mentioning them all, I'll forget. Yes?
Conversation are we supposed to have?
Okay, that's the next question. You know, what's the appropriate age to begin discussion about alcohol and other drugs, and what's the conversation? You know, the conversation that I would have, and again, and I modeled that. I use an example. My daughter said about her graduation party, so there won't be any beer. Well, that's right, honey, because we'd had family meetings. We had talked about the fact that, you know, our family value is that we don't want our children to use alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. And as a husband and wife, we model that and do that appropriately. And so having that conversation, even with little kids, you know, and that's the next question. What's the appropriate age to begin? You can go to the SAMHSA or CSAP websites, or the ODATIS website, or call Valerie or me. There's lots of discussion guides. There's lots of evidence-based, you know, research, you know, best practices, ways to have these conversations, you know, at every age, you know, from again as early as age 4 that I'm aware of, you know, up to high school age. So I think the conversation needs to be authentic. It needs to come from you. It needs to come from what your values are. And how do you tell your kids about your experiences? That's ouch. That's kind of ouchy for some of us. Again, developmental appropriateness, what they need to know. You know, what they need to know. You know, I'm not going to go back and recall my days in the 60s and 70s when I was a college student and, you know, the parties I went to. You know, that's not useful for them. But I might say to my child, yeah, your dad did drink alcohol at one point. What he learned was, you know, that wasn't a good thing for him to do, and I don't do it anymore. Now let's talk about you. I'm going to get the conversation back to you. You know, what I hope for you and what I expect for you is that you will be drug-free, because I believe in my heart and soul, because I love you so much, that every day that you don't use is a day of health. And I'm not afraid to say that. I'm not afraid to communicate that to my kids, to my grandkids. And then I try not to overreact if something happens, because again, Valerie said that 1 child in 5, that's in their teenage years has abused a prescription medication. You know, unfortunately, and I haven't seen the data for your school district, but you know, 20 to 25% of all the high school students have used alcohol in the last 30 days. I mean, it doesn't mean they've gotten wasted, but typically when young people use alcohol, they don't use it socially. It's not a glass of wine with their spaghetti. It's for another purpose. So again, have the conversation, communicate your values. Again, as simply as you can. I really wish you wouldn't use. It's our value that you don't use. If you do, what are the consequences? You're not going to chain your child in their bedroom till they're 30, but what are you going to do? My son, when he was in high school, we had him assessed once. He got drunk. We were concerned about it. There was a pattern. As it turned out, he didn't have a problem, didn't need treatment, but we had the guts, to pick up the phone, ask for help, and call somebody, and get him assessed. So it takes courage to be a parent in this day and age with this going on. In terms of how you have that conversation, and I'm kind of going around this, it really depends on the age of your child. And you have to be aware of the developmental appropriateness of this. With little children, too much information, isn't helpful. And again, keeping it simple and keeping it appropriate for the age group is important. I don't know if did I help? Is that?
Well, I just wanted more dialogue, like what am I supposed to say? How am I supposed to respond to her? If she's in a situation, what am I supposed, I guess I still don't have a clue what to say to her.
Okay, how she's only 7, okay.
You're starting early, like what?
Yeah.
She has no idea what anything is.
Okay.
She's oblivious, so what?
Ask open-ended questions. Maybe she knows more than you think. Ask open-ended questions. What has she heard? Okay, good, great. Okay, that's wonderful, yeah. But again,
if she's exposed to that, what am I supposed to say? Because I think my issue is, I have an issue with people that drink a lot. So I call it stupid juice.
Okay.
So you go somewhere and people are having a glass of wine with spaghetti. Well, basically I'm calling you stupid, even though a glass of wine is okay.
Okay.
So I don't think that's going to
Yeah, well, again, you could communicate, look, for some people they use alcohol as a beverage, and it's okay, but for a lot of people, they get in trouble, You're only 7 years older, 17 even, I don't care, your best choice is to remain free of using any alcohol, using any prescription drugs, using any drugs. If you have any questions, because I'm your dad or your mom, come and talk to me. The door's open, we can always talk about it. And to begin to build that trust as early as you can, like Valerie said, she's having conversations, with her 4-year-old, 3-year-old, not about, not about Vicodin. She wouldn't understand that, or Oxycontin, or Opan, or Percocet, or any of those things, But what are healthy choices? Good choices, healthy choices, and reinforcing that. So again, developmentally, wherever your child is, with a 7-year-old, that's probably what to talk about. And again, pay attention, listen for. Somebody once told me this is a teachable moment. Living in this society, you're going to see something on TV, you're going to see something in the movies, you're going to overhear something in public that she's going to be curious about. That's a good time to engage your child.
Can I say something?
Please.
You know what? I have a 9 and a 10-year-old, and both of my kids are extremely active in sports. And the one thing I told them is, if you guys really want to do well in sports, you cannot do drugs. You cannot. Does she dance or anything like that?
Yeah.
If you put it in something that they'll understand, like if she loves to dance, if you want to continue to dance and do really well with it, people who do that don't do drugs. They don't smoke. They don't drink. So if you can put it in maybe a term that they'll understand, that's what I've done.
Because I've done it with college. She wants to go away to college.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
You want to get away from your mother, you're going to get straight A's.
Okay. There you go. Yeah, again, like my story about family meetings and my daughter being bored to tears, but all of a sudden it was relevant, because of her driver's license. So yeah.
Doug, could you summarize Mindy's response, because we didn't hear any of that back here. So briefly tell us what Mindy shared.
Okay.
Surprised, because I've got a big mouth.
Yeah. What Mindy shared, and it was really pretty good, is tie the conversation to something that's relevant to your child. Mindy was sharing that, look, if you want to be in dancing or if you want to be in sports, alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs, there's no place for it. If you want to succeed, if you want to go to college, the best thing you can do is have a healthy body and not use those things. So make it relevant to something that your child, values. Thanks for getting that clarified. I hope I answered these. Question back here?
To write out one of those, but I was wondering, do you have an opinion about drug testing, kids who play sports in the high school sports and extracurriculars. Do you have anything whether or not that helps to deter them from getting involved in drugs?
Well, again, I have an opinion. I think, some of the sports teams up in our area, the students have actually asked for drug testing, because for them, it's a protection. Somebody like Craig, he was telling you his stories. There's a lot of pressures, and look, I'm an athlete. I'm going to be drug tested. Again, but I think it needs to come from the values of the community and the values of the young people. Again, if it's done to, for, and at young people. Desperate people will do desperate things. Again, I'm sure there are stories that Craig could have told. People can beat drug tests. There are ways to do it. I think coercion with drug testing, I'm not in favor of that. But if it's something the community values, if it's something in one of our high schools the young people literally ask for it, then I'm very much in favor of it. Anybody else? Other questions?
I'm wondering if you can share more about the family meeting, like how to start family meeting.
Oh, family meetings?
Yeah, what should we talk about it?
Well, again, in our family meetings at our family, we modeled them after something. There was a parenting program from years ago, and it's still around, called Systematic Training for Effective Parenting. And the whole idea is you just create a culture in your family, and you create a norm and an expectation that, look, we're going to have a family meeting, I don't know, every Friday night after school, every Sunday after church, whenever the family can get together. And the purpose of the family meeting is, to talk about, how things are going in the family. And it doesn't have to be deep and somber and serious. Some families, when they build that culture, can actually just enjoy getting together, telling stories, laughing about things, enjoying things, making plans for family vacations, checking on the babysitting schedule for the week, who's going to pick up who. I mean, I'm sure you're all into that. I have a granddaughter who's 16, who's an all-state softball player, and she's in speech, and she's going to the state speech tournament, and getting her to all of those things. And she has a big sister who drives, and a little sister who needs to get somewhere else, and a little brother who needs to go somewhere else. Family meetings are a time when you can sit down and everybody can be on the same page and know what's going on and where everybody is. And that's a lot more effective than just post-it notes on the refrigerator. Because I can tell you, when my daughter and her children don't talk about those issues, very often we'll get a call. We're Mimi and Pop Pop to the grandkids. I'll get a call, Pop Pop, I don't know where Kay is. That's my youngest granddaughter. Well, maybe we know because we remember and we wrote it down. But family meetings can be problem solving, information sharing, fun. But again, use those opportunities to communicate healthy choices and healthy values. And don't be afraid to do that. So there are models for that, but that's basically it. Be consistent, and again, it doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be heavy. It can just be a time for families to get together and share, what they hope for, what they dream about, what they want to do. Is that helpful? I think that's huge. I think, again, as a prevention specialist, if all families had family meetings, the problems of the world will never go away, but we'd see a real reduction in substance abuse problems in youth if we could be more open and more communicative. A lot of parents are just terrified to have that conversation.